Alright, so, oh boy. Alright, so we got to take a pause here because even those of you that weren't really paying attention will notice that this is completely different now. The video got corrupted, and basically I had to build a whole nother one. So, you know, I got these motors. These motors are different. The ESCs are the Icon 20s, not the Wraith, but it's still the same flight controller. This is a different frame. Well, it's the BX5 still, but it's the one that has, I don't know if you can see it, but it's actually got the new routed edges like I was talking about earlier in the video, which is a really nice feature. So you don't have to do that yourself. And these motors were given to me by Josh Bardwell for review. I shot all that stuff for him, and I needed to put it on a copter. So basically, because I screwed the video up, this frame is, I'm building it for a friend. I'm giving him the motors because I got them for free, and I feel bad like taking them, right? And then I'm giving the frame to my buddy who's never really had a quadcopter that was built like really solidly. So, you know, this one's going to be my build for him. That's like built and tuned and everything else. So, but basically, yeah, that's where we are. That's why things are different. All right, so let's get back into the build here. You know, yeah, that's it. One of the things that I missed on the last build here, before you bolt all this stuff down, and I think I commented in, was you need to put the RX in here, the radio receiver in here. So basically I need to solder that in. That needs to come from the bottom, and not a big deal. So basically take one side of your motors off. Nice thing about this is, so if you need to work on this, basically take the front stand toss off, take one side of your motors off, and then you can flip the entire thing. Well, let's see, don't make a liar out of me. Oh yeah, off the stand toss. You can flip the entire thing over to work on it. So let me grab the receiver module, and then we'll solder that in. Okay, so for those of you that aren't familiar, this is the XM Plus. It's a micro receiver. Again, basically it comes with pin headers. There's a straight one and an angle one. We're going to use the straight one. So we're going to solder the straight one in from the top side here, and we're going to grab the ground 5-volt and RX3, right? TX3 is going to be left open on it. So you can probably see that in this camera over here. So it's the ground 5-volt RX3. So we'll flip this over. We'll solder it on the back side. This is like the one thing that we forgot on the back. Not a big deal. So, all right. This is the ground one, I believe, right? I don't remember. Yeah. So the ground pins on this, again, are like a really heavy copper pad, and they're notoriously hard to solder, so that's not going to be the first one we solder. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'll put it in the hole where I want it, and I'll locate it. And this is easier if you do it before you put the ESCs on, but I'll locate it, put it so that it's kind of where I want it, and then I'll put a little solder on my iron there, and not the ground pad's heavy, right? So yeah, oh yeah, oh, I burned my finger on that one. Not good. Okay. All right. So basically, I'm just going to take one of these and I'll hold it exactly how I want it. This might be hard to shoot, but I'll hold it in place like I want it. Heat that up. Get just a little tack on it, right? In welding, it's called a tack. I don't know if that's what it's called in soldering, but Yeah, when I look at that, it's tilted this way a little bit, so I'll heat that little bit up and I'll move it again to where I want it. Alright, so I'm basically just putting a huge blob of solder on my iron and doing all the things that you're not supposed to do to kind of get it to be in the spot where I want it. Alright, now that I'm happy with where it is, we're actually going to solder some joints here. So I like where it is, so I'll solder the one next to it in nice and solid, and now that's a nice solder joint. That's the way that they're supposed to look. I'm going to check it one more time. In fact, I'll even throw the XM Plus on there. Make sure it looks like how we want it when we have it on there. Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. Okay, cool. It's sitting nice. It's sitting exactly how we want it. Okay, so once you do 2 or 3, well, once you do more than one, this one's just like a light tack, right? It's not a very good solder joint. I can break that. Once I've done the one, and if I do another one after that, pretty much you're committed to this. Like, that's going to be how it's going to be, right? That's going to be where it's going to be. So that's a nice solder joint. Now the one that I just lightly tacked, I'm going to heat that one up so that it flows nicely. The same thing over here with the ground. The ground one's going to be a pain in the ass. So you can do thermal reliefs on ground pads. And I'm surprised, because this is like a pretty decent board. This is a pretty complicated board designed by somebody that kind of knew what they were doing, right? I don't know why they didn't put thermal reliefs on the ground pads. Maybe, and the guy that, you know, not to take anything away from him, right? The guy that designed this probably knows more than I do about board design, which is quite a lot, actually. But so I'm trying to give him credit, right? There might be a reason why they didn't put thermal reliefs on the ground pads, other than they didn't know what they were doing. Finally got that one to flow. But yeah, that's going to be the hardest pin that you'll solder. So it finally flowed in. All right, let me grab some alcohol and a paper towel and wipe that off. And again, it's going to be Alright, so we cleaned our flux on that. Now we can take our XM Plus and put it down here, just like that. See how that's going to sit on there? Real nice. Ta-da! Alright, we'll solder it in. It's going to be this nice flat thing. Before I solder it, I'm actually going to put the shrink tube partially over it, and I'm going to put a piece of double-sided sticky on the back side of the shrink tube, just because it's going to be so tight in there once I solder it on, right? Like, it's going to be hard to get that stuff on. So I'll trim this back a little bit. So you're not going to be able to get the shrink tube all the way over the way that I'm doing this, and that's fine. So before I solder it on, let's do that. Alright, so I'm just going to trim this back just a hair, because it's designed to slide over the whole thing. We don't want it to look sloppy. Grab a very small piece of this double-sided sticky tape here. That on the back side. I'm not using the double-sided so much to keep the component in place as much as I'm using it to put a little buffer between it and the Betaflight board, so that it lasts a little bit in a crash. These are all my like crash worthy tips that I wasn't sure if I was gonna give, but I think if you're like into the video this long, like, you deserve to get them. So if you've ever seen me fly, you know that my quads will take a beating, and it's because of like all the little things that I do like this. Alright, so I'm gonna push that down where I like it. Not too much though. Oh boy, gotta get this out of the way. We don't want to burn that carbon. Alright. Whoa. Alright. So I've only heated one of them up, right? And it's a nice solder joint. I can actually reheat that and do a little bit of adjustment on it if I want to, which I did. And now I'm committed because I'm doing the rest of them. It's on there. And this is where a pair of nice side snips come in to cut that down, which I don't have anymore because I broke mine. So nice pair of side snips. I wouldn't have to take this off, but I do, and that's fine because we're actually going to take this off and we're going to use a plastic standoff, and you'll see why in a second. Alright, when you cut these, you don't want to cut them like super flush, right? You want to leave just a little bit. Oh boy. Is that one, two, three? Okay, got it. That's another thing. You want to make sure that you get them all out of there. You don't want to cut them super flush because you'll stress the solder joint that you did in there, and you'll crack it, and bad things happen. Okay, so I'm going to shrink this this heat shrink on there so that it's like nice and tight, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so now this is shrunk down. We're going to take our antenna wires here, and we're going to tuck them underneath the board. Okay, for those of you that don't know, this is like extension. This part right here is the antenna. So we'll tuck this all underneath of here. And we're going to run one of these up a leg here, up one of the standoffs, and we'll shrink it down on the standoff. And the other one, it's weird, these are a little bit shorter than the old way that they did the XM Plus, which is cool with me. Like, I think that they were too long anyhow, so. But anyway, we're going to run one here, like up that standoff. And we could run the other one up this standoff, but I like to tuck it underneath the frame. I guess we're going to tuck it out the front leg because these are a little bit shorter. I usually tuck them underneath the back leg here and tape one on. But that's fine. We'll run this one out and tuck it underneath the front leg. Like so. And before you bolt this on, I run my battery straps all the way around. There's a slot here on the side and this side that you can run a battery strap through. So if you're going to run your battery straps through these, yeah, I recommend putting them in before you bolt the board down. But yeah, okay. So am I happy with that? See. Should I just run it? Why'd they have to change the length on me? Why'd you have to go and do that, Breeze guy? Yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run this one down the side and I'll tape it to the side of the frame here. That should be pretty good. This one is a clockwise motor. Oh, and one of the cool things about these motors is, so if you have motors that have the reverse thread, or clockwise, counterclockwise, whatever, right? Like basically to know which way you need to put the motor on, hold the prop nut, turn the motor the way that the motor is going to turn. So this prop goes this way. Turn it the way that it's going to turn. No, actually this prop goes this way. Turn it the way that it's going to turn. And if it tightens the nut, done. Happy days, that's the right one. So these are the abnormally threaded ones, the reverse threaded ones, and then these are so this is the front, right? And it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I always get confused. Everybody numbers it, whatever. These spin like that, right? And these spin like this. So just, yeah, all right. Okay, so that's one antenna. The other antenna, so you can use the metal standoff. It's better to use a plastic standoff if you have them for this one, but for the ranges we're going, the metal standoff will be fine. But because I have plastic standoffs, and this is for a good friend, I'm going to use the plastic one for this to get him the maximum range. Alright, so basically we're taking, what length is this? 31? That's what this should be. And it's, wow! They tuned them for 5th wave too, not, yeah, they've changed up the XM Plus receivers. So this is cut for a 5th wave. You kind of want, man, I don't know. I like a 1/4 wave, which should be 32 millimeters. Whatever. I'm gonna strip this back to 32 millimeters. No, I'm not. I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it. Fuck it. 5th wave is okay. So basically what I do is I take that antenna, I put it on this plastic standoff like so. And then I shrink a piece of tube over it to hold it in place. And you can use tape too. You don't have to use shrink tube. I think shrink tube looks cleaner when you're done. I can't believe they did 5th wave. Alright, so now that antenna's shrunk on there, we can put all the screws in and get back to the build here. If you do it like this, one of the things you want to be careful with is that you don't rotate that standoff when you're tightening bolts at the field or loosening or whatever. It should basically stay the direction that you put it, otherwise you're going to break that antenna, which kind of defeats the purpose of mounting it like that. So when you look at it, it's nice and clean, like you don't see the antennas. Alright, let me put these motors on. Oh, and you'll notice one of these doesn't have a screw in it. It wasn't threaded. You know, I feel bad giving him that one, but, you know, that's free. Larry, if I had a replacement, I'd give it to you. I don't have a replacement motor for it. Hey, you know, maybe LD Power. I'm not big enough. LD Power's not going to send me another one. Alright, so now we can finally bolt our board down. And if you're a stickler for putting all four, like the way that I mount this, it doesn't really fit a standard nut there. If you're a stickler for putting all four in, you can put the nut on and then screw the standoff in from the bottom, and then screw the standoff down to the. But basically, I think 3 is good enough to hold it, and I'm only using 3 to mount it down, and that's fine. These plastic nuts don't seem to back off too much anyhow, so. Alright, and now that you have your receiver in there, this is a decent time to plug everything in and power it up. One of the checks I do is check for continuity before powering everything up. I'm pretty sure this is going to work, so here we go. Yeah, red light. Perfect. So these have to be bound in, I think D8 mode is the bind state for them. So basically on your Tyrannus, if you're using that receiver, so hold this button in. Such a dance. Okay, so it's D16 mode without telemetry.
Internal bind.
There we go.
Internal bind.
Channel 1 through 8 without telemetry.
Internal bind.
There we go. So now it's bound up. I should be able to unplug this. When I plug it on now, I'll get, instead of red and green together, I should get a green light because my radio's on. If you can see that, hopefully you can. See the little green LED down here. It was red and green before to say that it was in bind mode. Okay, so there it is. That's it's bound up. All right, cool. Unplug this guy. We're almost done with the soldering on this thing. So excited. So the next thing that we need to solder on is the only thing that's left on this is the VTX and the camera to solder on, and like this thing's done. So let's get those on there. Okay, so we're gonna solder on the VTX cable here. So the first thing is, so again, the TBS Black Sheep, the Unify Pro V2 is the one that I think fits the best on the back of here. So it's the 5-volt version. You don't need the backpack like I showed in some of my other videos using this flight controller, because this flight controller can, so I just snipped off one of the ends on there. Now, oh yeah, okay, stop. Okay, don't just snip off a random end. I know by looking at it which end to snip. So one end fits in here, the other end goes into the P&P. So don't snip off the end that doesn't go into here. Make sure you do that right. Yeah, don't make that mistake. So, okay, I've done enough of these that I just look at it and know which end is right. But yeah, so it's important. All right, so now I'll strip this wire off here. What is, I think white is the smart audio, right? Vid audio, yeah, exactly. Okay, so white's the smart audio. So white I'm actually going to take back about an inch. I'll cut it back a little shorter because it's going to go to a different spot on the board, and then we'll strip these, we'll tin these, and we'll put them on. For those of you playing along at home, I overstripped the red one. I left a little too much off, so I tinned it, then I cut it back. And maybe the ground I could probably cut a little bit off too. And the audio, sure. Video, maybe, yeah. I just made them all too long. Okay, alright, so, done with that. So I thread these. There's a hole on here. I mean, will it fit through this way? I don't think it will. No. Yeah, I guess you could fit it through. If you really screwed up, you could probably get it through. But the full size ones, no, you're not going to be able to get it through there. So we're gonna tin the TX1 pin, which is right next to this ground pad right here. I'm sorry if it's like in the shadow for you. I'm trying to get as much of this on end shot as I can. So we've tinned the TX1 pin, and then that's going to go to the white wire. That's going to be our smart audio. And this is how we do all the fun things to the OSD. Alright, and then we're going to grab, yeah, you can either come from this side or you can come through here. I like to come through this side so that it's out of the way of the camera. So I bring the wires in this way and around this side, and they end up being out of the way of the camera when the camera comes in and strikes things like this when you have a crash. So it's video in, video out, which is the R. So okay, I have another Betaflight F3 board for sure. All right, so there's 4 pins on this top row here. You probably can't see them like that clearly through the wires here. And going from this side, it's the video in, which is going to come from our camera. Video out, which goes to our VTX. This is either your 5-volt or your raw. We definitely had to select 5 volts on the back side for this pin. For the VTX. If you wanted to run a VTX off of straight battery power, you'd select raw, but this VTX only takes 5 volts. And then this is our very special ground, which is isolated from the ground plane for, you know, the ESCs, everything else. So we're going to tie our video transmitter and our the VTX ground and the camera ground will go there. Okay, I've decided that instead of soldering this on first, because it's going to cover this 5-volt pad, I'm going to do the camera wire first. And basically I take the camera for the Runcam Swift Mini and cut it in half, is my standard wire length on this. So I'll just cut it right down the middle here. And then I'll tin these, solder them on first before I solder this the VTX wire on. And this wire right here is why I'm doing it, the camera first, because basically running the wires this way, I'm going to cover some things up. So that's the 5-volt to the camera. So this is the video for the camera, video for the VTX. On this rail down here, it's the 5-volt for the camera. This is going to be the 5-volt for the VTX. Then I'll put it in now. And this pin is both the ground for the VTX and the ground for the camera. Why they didn't put 2 of them in, I'll never know. That's it. I can turn my soldering iron off. We're done with all the soldering. Feels good. Don't it feel good? Hey everybody, so that this doesn't become a 4-hour segment, I'm going to break it up into playlists, and I will link in the previous one and the next one here so that it's a little bit easier for you to follow along. I appreciate you watching to this point in the video. Please continue watching, hit that like, subscribe button, and leave your comments. Alright, love y'all.